All right. Welcome to this latest episode of the Nest New England Sports Talk podcast. Today we're missing our charismatic co-founder Amartya, but I will do my best to fill in his shoes. So before we begin our podcast today, I want to talk about some housekeeping. Specifically, we recently started a Twitter handle with the same name, Nest New England Sports Talk, as well, same name as our Instagram and this general YouTube channel. So again, if you like what you're seeing, just feel free to subscribe and follow us on Twitter. And you can kind of follow some of our in-game content as we commentate on Twitter. We're joined, I myself and of course Anirban, we're joined by Ravi and Rohan, who at this point are two. Yep, great to have you. They're just basically two kind of mainstays on our show, so we're always happy to see them. How are you guys doing today?
Always good on this new year. Well, my first episode of the new year. So happy new year, everyone. Happy 2022. And let's see where the Nest goes moving from here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, preview the very last week of the playoffs or very last week of the regular season and start getting into the excitement of the playoffs.
Excellent. I couldn't agree more. So today we're going to be talking about a few things, right? We're going to first talk about the blowout victory that the Patriots had last Sunday at Gillette against Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll talk about tomorrow's upcoming fixture against the Miami Dolphins in Miami, as well as wrapping up with the implications for what this game tomorrow might mean for our playoff picture. So we just want to talk really quickly about the Patriots-Jaguars game. Of course, it was a really welcome victory after two straight losses against what I would call fellow AFC contenders, the Colts and the Bills. And we won 50-10, of course. New England putting up 50 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and just some really key, some really kind of quick stats from an overall very dominating performance throughout. We saw our running game take 4 touchdowns cumulatively. Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris combining each with 2 touchdowns. Ramondre going over 100 yards with Damian Harris exiting the game a little earlier due to a hamstring problem, but we don't anticipate any problems with him playing tomorrow, as far as I know. In terms of the passing game, we had Mac Jones performing really well, actually. We saw, in particular, a connection he made with Christian Wilkerson, who's activated off the practice squad instead and Kill Harry, and was able to chip in 42 yards and 2 touchdowns, which was a really welcome sight and a great practice squad elevation. We also saw Jacoby Myers get over 70 yards in receiving. And overall, I think Mac Jones had a 128 passing rating, a 73.3% completion, and 227 yards, 3 touchdowns. So a really, really good performance by him, especially after 2 kind of quiet weeks against the Colts and Buffalo, as we've analyzed previously. Last week, we also saw a good performance from the Patriots defense. For example, their defensive line had 2 sacks and 3 hits, and were consistently kind of pressuring Trevor Lawrence into decisions, so I'm sure we'll talk about. Secondary had 3 picks, J.C. Jackson, Miles Bryant, and Kyle Duggar. So overall, a really excellent performance on all fronts. I just want to ask you guys if you could point out 3 things from this game, or let's say 2 for the sake of time. I want you to point out 2 things from this game that you thought we did so well to tilt the game in our favor, especially compared to maybe not doing those things as well against the Bills or the Colts.
Yeah, I gotta say the running game is definitely back. You mentioned that the running game, they got like four scores over there, and so I mean I kind of saw some difficulty with the running game in that, especially in that game against the Bills. I mean, it was kind of a spotty performance against the Bills and before that as well. But in addition to that, I mean, I gotta like the fact that Mac Jones he showed up, right? Mac Jones showed up and the defense did its job. Granted, Trevor Lawrence is having a rough year. He's been kind of struggling. And of course, the Jaguars, they've got a bunch of internal problems as well on the coaching side. And they're still looking, the team's kind of in shambles right now. But that's not to say that they weren't trying, right? I mean, like Trevor Lawrence, he is a rookie. He's trying to make a name for himself. And I mean, especially like after that game when he's going to shake hands with Mac Jones, it was kind of like a weird thing to watch. I mean, like they knew each other from earlier on, and now their paths have diverged so much. So it's kind of fun to watch that. But for the Patriots, though, it's good to see them back, right? I mean, like I mean, you said what three components? I mean, offense and defense, offense coming down to running and passing, and of course, the defense showing up as well. So, granted, I'm gonna have to see how it's gonna turn out against stronger teams, and I do think Miami is a stronger team. We'll get to that, but even though that's essentially at this point they got nothing to play for since they're already eliminated, but and it's an away team, and the Pats have historically struggled in Miami. But I mean, granted, the two rough games, I like to see a bounce back.
That's great. Yeah, and just as a quick note, Ravi, in regards to the running game, we talked about Damien Harris. Damien Harris actually scored. Now he has 14 touchdowns in the regular season. He's tied for second place all time for Patriots single season rushing touchdowns behind LeGarrette Blount at 18. So overall, I think we're just starting to see a really. I totally agree with your point, Rohan. Sorry, Ravi, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree about. I mean, obviously, like the offense, just like both in the passing game and the rushing game, absolutely dominated the Jaguars. Like they weren't even close on either end. Mac Jones did a great job. I said last week when I was on that this game could be a good confidence builder after two very tough games that Mac had against the Colts and the Bills. So I think definitely succeeding that. But the two things that I would like to highlight is one, our defense, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, 3 tackles for losses, completely shutting out the Jags until or keeping them out of the red zone until garbage time at the end. It was completely resounding on their end. So, and that complemented the offense very well, obviously just keeping the Jags off the field. The other thing that I'd like to highlight is our offensive line. They had pretty staggering zero sacks by the Jags, and zero QB hits in the entire game, which is just like absolutely incredible. Like you gave Mac a very clean pocket, and he did a very good job with that pocket. So I think overall, like we just like in almost pretty much every area that you could define, absolutely dominated Jaguars. So that was good to see our team running on all full cylinders, and probably a good morale boost heading into the playoffs.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point, and look, at the end of the day, we all know what the Jacksonville Jaguars have been this season. We know that they have one of the worst secondaries in the league, and frankly, one of the worst like defenses in the league. And I think at the end of the day, though, what matters is doing your job with the opportunities available to you. The only way for us to get like really successful seasons is to take the game and beat bad teams, right? If you don't, like, it doesn't matter how bad a team is, you still have to finish the job, right? And we saw the Jaguars actually keep things close with other teams earlier this season. We even saw them have pretty shocking wins earlier in the season that we talked about last week. So again, it's really easy to look back, I think, and say, oh, 50-10, this game doesn't matter. It was a joke. Who cares?
And 2 of their wins were against AFC East teams.
And 2 were against AFC East. Yeah. So, but that's just my point, right? You have to do your job against all different types of teams. And even if that means that Mac has 128 passing rating against one of the worst secondaries in the league, he still did that. He still made those throws. And if you actually look at, you're talking about confidence. I think I totally agree with that. And in regards to the offensive line, I think we saw Mac Jones had so much time, which actually allowed him to make really difficult throws. Like, for example, his touchdown pass to Jacoby Myers was really, really excellent. It was a lofted pass that Myers just managed to grab his hands on before going out of bounds, right? And it was like if I'm remembering correctly, it was like a 20 or 30 yard loft. It was excellent. Then you saw his connection with Christian Wilkerson. How often have we seen this at the Patriots? You just take some random guy off the practice squad or whatever that no one's necessarily heard of, but then they work in your system, right? He ends up getting 2 really crucial touchdowns for us. And what I want to point out here really quickly, is that Christian Wilkerson was actually here instead of N'Keal Harry, who was a healthy scratch for this game. And a lot of people kind of in the post analysis are saying this is kind of the writing on the wall for N'Keal. This is probably the cue that is his time to leave at the end of this season. So what do you think? What do you guys think about Christian Wilkerson taking this opportunity off the practice squad and getting 2 touchdowns, 40 yards, and then maybe comparing that to N'Keal Harry's kind of struggles at New England?
Yeah, for Wilkerson, the fact that he's been able to do all that, especially when N'Keal Harry's been such a fixture for this team for a while. I mean, recent struggles, I don't really think they say much, but I mean, if you're a healthy scratch, it's not really a good sign. And Belichick has made some questionable decisions, in my opinion, in the past, but usually time tells me that those questions were not so those decisions were not so questionable after all. For example, when he decided to get rid of Cam Newton, I thought that was a questionable decision at the time. I thought, okay, this is a rebuilding team. Cam Newton, okay, Pats are kind of struggling, and then in comes Mac Jones and he does all of this. So those are several things that I wasn't really able to see essentially like in the past. And I mean, with Bill's strategy, I would have to say it's a little eccentric at times, but you know, I can't really criticize it because of the result it's given. So if that means that N'Keal Harry is a healthy scratch despite everything he's given to the team, it's kind of tough to swallow. But you know, whatever, so be it, and that's the nature of the game.
I think for a while now we've seen the writing on the wall with N'Keal Harry. He's you know, even in this first season we could see that he's clearly not working out. I will say we did a very good job. Like this season, he's actually been aside from receiving an excellent blocker. You could see that in the first Bills game that we had. He had a number of crucial blocks that really opened up things for our run game, and he was probably a very very serious contributor in that game, though not obviously on the stat sheet. So he will be missed in that sense, but yeah, I do think this is a sign of the writing finally being on the wall and us moving on from Harry.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you guys said, and I just want to add, like, I do really value N'Keal's contributions as a blocker. I mean, we saw earlier this season against the Bills in our first encounter, we just had so much success on lanes that he was blocking in. But I guess for the Patriots, what they have to think is, what is X player offering that other Y, Z, and W players cannot offer? And in this game, I know I saw players like Johnny Smith or Hunter Henry also providing a lot of blocking prowess. So, and even Brandon Bolden, and of course we have a fullback like Jacob Johnson. So I kind of wonder if that's playing into Belichick's calculus a bit. Like, yeah, N'Keal Harry is blocking really well, but A, that's not why we drafted him so early in the round, and B, maybe there are other people on our team who can also play that role and provide something else on top of that. So I wonder if that's something that might be contributing. But I guess aside from N'Keal Harry, one other thing I do want to talk about really quickly is special teams, I guess. You know, if I were to take one slight negative from this game, it was really the continuation of some of our special teams challenges. We had a blocked field goal, blocked extra point from Nick Folk, as well as I guess a mistaken snap by Jake Bailey. That at that point, of course, the mistake didn't matter. We were already up by many points. But I think for me, the concerning thing is that these mistakes happen, right? I don't see the Patriots as a team that really take their foot off the gas pedal and make sloppy mistakes when they're in front. Like, for example, we saw even one of the plays that impressed me the most in this game was late in the third quarter when the game was already decided. You see Brandon Bolden was like maybe 2 yards from a first down, and he looked like he just gotten stopped, and he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing until he got the first down. You know, that's the type of spirit that I think the Patriots consistently impress. You know, even when we're up by 20 or 30, we're going to take the game for you. We're going to still fight for yards. So for me, I do still find it concerning, whether it's in a 50-10 Jaguars loss or in a tight game in the wild card when you have like a mistaken snap or something. So what do you guys think about that? How much do you really care on a scale 1 to 10? And how does that kind of, especially in comparison to the fact that none of those mistakes had any implication in this game?
Well, I mean, I said at the beginning of the season that the Patriots need to fix their mechanics. I do remember earlier on they had some issues with some fumbling of the ball, and then of course in those two losses they had issues with blocked punts or like blocked field goals, as you mentioned. So I mean, I kind of said at the beginning of the season that if this is the extent of their issues, then I'm not so worried because these are mechanics and those are things that are easily fixable. The fact that there's still issues right now would give me cause for a little bit of pause, right? Because if they've had a few months to really work on that and improvement, and that's probably one area where I haven't really seen a lot of improvement. And if anything, I would say it's probably even gotten a little bit worse. Routine things like punting, kicking a field goal are all of a sudden not so routine anymore. And if it's a close game, then that could definitely end up being the difference. And of course, during the course of the playoffs, when you're going to be up against good teams, potentially against like the Chiefs, for example, or if you're up against the Bills, I mean those are things that could end up like coming back to haunt you. Because you're not going to get Jacksonville every single week. You're not going to be able to put 50 points every single week. You're not going to be able to hold your opponent to 10 points every single week. So yes, the bulk of the game is how much the defense does, how much the offense does. Is Mac Jones in good shape? Is he throwing the ball well? Are the running backs doing their job? Is the defense doing their job? Are they getting enough sacks, getting key interceptions at key times? All that matters, but if you can't get the basics down, then that really like throws a wrench in pretty much everything else. So that's not a good sign moving forward, unfortunately. And they got to work on that and work on it fast.
Yeah, I'll be brief, but I completely agree with what Rohan said. I think the one saving factor is that it is still better to make mistakes in the regular season than in the postseason. So it's good, if you're seeing these sort of rare mistakes that you see them now. And I really hope that, after this game, with a couple sloppy plays on special teams and some very sloppy defense in the last two games that we've had against the Bills and Colts, that Belichick really takes some time and going over the fundamentals just before the playoffs, knowing that literally any of these mistakes could prove very costly in these do or die games.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think I don't really know enough about NFL special teams to know what exactly, like, I feel like things like just handling a snap. I feel like if you've been doing this your whole career, it's just really interesting to me how that can happen. So I just do hope it's like a one-time thing or something like that. But
Not a one-time thing; it's been a recurring thing.
well, mishandling a
several
snap, I
games.
guess. But yeah, like I see what you're saying. Like the general theme of kind of special teams.
That's to be the more worrying part.
errors.
If it's a one-off, I wouldn't be so worried that this is happening again and again.
Yeah, like I'd say more generally, yeah. I would agree with you that more generally it is occurring, and I'm sure Bill Belichick is looking at that very closely, especially. I mean, you think about how many of our last games, the decision, like how many times were we within one possession and then we ended up losing. Like every point really matters in a lot of the games that we've lost this season. So I agree with that there. And one thing I actually want to talk about before we move on, this is maybe a little more of a debate, or just want to hear some different viewpoints here. To what extent do you kind of rate the Patriots defense against the Jaguars in this game compared to the Bills and Colts? And what I'm trying to say by that is, I think the Patriots defense and their secondary in particular got a lot of perhaps like justified kind of irritability, I guess is a good word, against Buffalo Bills, because we saw how many times on late down plays they just couldn't get a stop. How Josh Allen was able to escape pressure and make good passes. And today, and sorry, last week, I think we saw really an opposite thing. We saw Trevor Lawrence just getting harried the whole game, though this was by the defensive line. And, if you look at some of the interceptions that he threw three, right? And I'd say the one by JC Jackson was the most impressive for me, because that one just didn't look like it would have really been a pick. I mean, it looked like a classic receiver run up and then cut back route.
That was refreshing to watch.
Read it. Yeah, it was
especially seeing JC Jackson's tough game against Buffalo, because there were a couple of key like interceptions that he should have had that ended up getting dropped, and that also that ended up costing the Patriots like later on, because the Bills would end up driving and then
exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, and I guess so. My question on that is, do you kind of take this as a sign that the Patriots defense is getting back to their midseason form, or do you consider it more as like playing a bad team? Because I consider
not
more the former.
Right? I would say it's probably more the former as well, because when you're up against Jacksonville, granted, no game is really a slam dunk. There's really no such thing as an easy team, no matter how bad the team is on paper. As you mentioned earlier, you still got to throw the ball. You still got to make those key interceptions, key sacks, key plays. No matter how bad a team may be on paper, you still got to execute at the end of the day. But the fact that Trevor Lawrence is really, really struggling this year made that job a lot easier. It's good to know that the defense showed up, because if they didn't show up, then they wouldn't have even been able to do that. But is this a sign that somehow all of the troubles for the defense are over? I would say not, right? I mean, granted, the defense has done a phenomenal job throughout the year, and they've had some extremely great performances, especially against the Bills in Buffalo. To me, I would say that's hands down one of the one of the best New England defensive performances I've seen. So yeah, if it has the defense recovered to its prior form, I would hope so. And their earlier showings in other games during the season would tell me that the fundamentals are strong. And so if this is just a reversion back to the fundamentals, then I'm not going to complain about that.
Yeah, I think we all agree that playing the Jags is definitely a confounding variable. Like they're, definitely like we could not have put up this sort of performance against most of the teams in the NFL. But I think there are a couple promising things from the defensive end. Like Anirban mentioned, there were a couple of interceptions, particularly by J.C. Jackson that looked incredibly hard to catch. We made all of them. In addition, I think, especially in comparison to the Colts game, I just saw less sloppy penalties being thrown. It could also mean, though, that in this game we could rely on our offense far more to convert if we did have these sloppy penalties. But in general, we did have less penalties. And I think overall, I think the defense looked much tighter, in particular compared to the Colts game. The Bills game, I think our defense did perform all things considered pretty well. I think it was our offense that really screwed over our defense to an extent. But I think even though this is definitely not all our defensive problems to fix, because we held the Jags without a touchdown until the fourth quarter and 10 points overall in the whole game. That's not really a prize in any way. But I think if you delve a little bit deeper into the actual game and the stats, there are a couple nuggets that suggest we're good. And to my point earlier that I made, I think this is coming out of this game, it does bring you a lot of confidence to have a game where you have 3 interceptions, hold the other team to just 10 points, so many QB hits, so many tackles for losses. So yeah.
That sounds good. I think we're in pretty good consensus there, and I think that's maybe a good place to leave the Patriots-Jaguars game for now, and actually transfer our discussion to an upcoming matchup. So right now, to give some context of the playoff picture and really the role of this game in it, we're 10-6, right? We're second in the AFC East, clinched the playoffs. The Dolphins got knocked out of the playoffs officially. Now they're 8-8. So this game doesn't really mean, I guess, anything for them, in terms of the actual season, apart from, I guess, draft position versus for us. It does give us a very slim chance to take back the AFC East, and in the case that the Bills happen to lose against the Jets, anything can happen. And aside from that, this game probably arguably means more to us than to Miami. So we all know what happened week 1, right? We fell to the Dolphins 17-16 in Mac Jones's first NFL career start. We saw a very different team in that game. We saw a team with a O-line that was had a lot of injuries, a lot of reshuffling going around, couldn't really protect Mac Jones as well from pressure. We saw James White was still with our team. We were, as in before his injury, running the ball a lot more and not really trusting Mac at a very large level yet. And meanwhile, this was a game where many had criticized our defense for not putting Tua Tagovailoa under enough pressure and allowing him to really complete a lot of difficult throws or otherwise. But like I said, we're at a really different point in the season. The Dolphins just got really thoroughly beaten, 34-3 by the Tennessee Titans last week in the game that knocked them out of the playoffs. There's a lot of kind of speculation around Tua's role at Miami after this season. There's a lot of disappointment, right? Because the Miami's offense has not really been clicking, especially in the last few weeks. They said they brought in a lot of players this season, like Albert Wilson and Malcolm Brown, who haven't really lifted the team in the way they would have hoped. So I'm just going to start by asking you guys, first of all, how much do you really care, or how much do you think this game really matters in this season's context on a scale of 1 to 10? And second of all, I want you to identify one feature of the game, like one battle or one kind of tactical battle, I guess you could say, that you think will be really important.
On a scale of 1 to 10 in importance of this game, I'm going to say it's a 3. It's pretty low. It's not a 1, right? Because in theory, things could change, right? Because technically the AFC top seed is, technically speaking, it's not out of reach, but I emphasize the word technically because the Chiefs and Titans, they're 11-6. They're tied for the top seed. And for the Patriots at 10-6, many things would need to happen for the Patriots to get the top seed. So the Patriots would need to beat Miami tomorrow, and Buffalo would have to lose to the Jets, and the Chiefs and Titans would both have to lose their games. All of that would need to happen somehow for the Patriots to capture the top seed. Unlikely for even one of those outcomes to happen. I mean, I think it's fairly likely that the Patriots are going to beat the Dolphins, but all those other outcomes, I think that's a stretch at best. And then when it comes to getting the AFC East, okay, fine, you're not going to get the top seed, you're not going to be able to skip the wild card round. Okay, can you at least play that wild card game at home? Doesn't look like it, because you got to win the division to do that. And it looks like the Bills are probably going to win the division because all they got to do is beat the Jets, and that looks very, very likely at this point. Barring some sort of shock result, I'm not saying it can't happen, but I think it's unlikely at this point. So we're basically down to now the Patriots are probably going to get the 5, 6, or 7 seed, and they're going to be playing the wild card game on the road. So at that point, I would say it doesn't really matter, because you already know you're in the playoffs, and you already know you're going to very likely going to have to play the wild card round, and pretty likely to have to play it on the road. So I don't really see much in it for the Patriots to really overextend themselves. I know it sounds bad if I say that, because you should go into every game, you should try to win, you should try to do your best. But at this point, if you're the 5 seed versus the 6 seed or the 7 seed, I guess in theory it matters in terms of the opponents that you're going to get later on. But in terms of getting playoff games at home or away, or having to play an extra game, it doesn't really affect things. And then for the Dolphins, as you mentioned, it really matters, like, not at all. Like, at best, it probably matters a little bit for Tua, because he's been having an okay year, maybe not the best year, but he's been hanging in there. And I would say that I mean, if he shows up and puts up a strong performance against the Patriots tomorrow, then he has a case for staying on the team for a while. Even though internally things might look a little shaky, we don't know what the situation is inside the locker room. But in terms of the game itself for tomorrow, I think most people, most of the experts would think it's a slam dunk for the Patriots. I would say not so fast, because the Dolphins, they've got some key pieces in there. They got Devontae Parker, who's been having a relatively good year, and he might give JC Jackson a tough time, right? Because JC Jackson might have trouble covering him and matching his speed, and of course we do know that JC's been kind of he's had a rough game, and then he's kind of come back, but given all of that, I mean, that's not to say that's going to happen, but if something were to really play a factor in swinging things in favor of the Dolphins, I would say it's probably that. And of course, you got to look at the history, and Pats have historically not done so well in Miami. So, and a few years ago, that's what ended up being crucial, because they ended up a couple of years ago, they ended up losing the last game in Miami, and then they had to play the wild card, and then they lose to the Titans, and that's how the 1920 season ended up going.
We remember that.
So there are many.
So that makes sorry, Rohan, just one second. I think you brought up a really nice point about the seeding, and I think actually what I think would be good is if we have a little quick discussion just to resolve that before we go on to the other points you mentioned about the Miami offense and our struggles in Miami, which I think are really good. So
sure, I know that was a lot to unpack.
Make sure. No, I mean, it's not bad for asking you. So let's discuss that, right? So Rohan's saying that this game's a 3 out of 10 in importance. And I think, Ravi, I heard you earlier saying you disagree a bit. So let's talk about this.
Yeah, I'll actually slightly disagree with the point about seeding. I mean, I largely agree with a lot of the points that Rohan made, but I think that, this game, ultimately, it does still matter a lot if we win or lose. Like, just in a vacuum, we need, like, winning this game. We don't necessarily win a lot unless some teams ahead of us lose big. I'll concede that. But if we lose this game, we drop to the 6 or the 7 seed, and then we're just playing teams that I really think we'll have a much harder time against. Particularly, I would like to avoid a first round matchup against the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs have, even though they lost to the Bengals, have completely taken up a year, and I really would not like to face that team. I would really not like to face that team early on, given how they're firing in all cylinders, defensively and offensively. So I think I would say it does matter in that sense. I think seeding is something to worry about. Obviously, you don't want to overextend yourself. And the other thing too is psychologically, I think it is important to play a good game just before the playoffs, just to have that confidence. Because 1 week later, we're going to be in a do or die game if we have an atrocious game against a team that's already kicked out of the playoffs, or even just like a pretty sloppy game. Even if it's close, that's definitely gonna hurt afterwards and hurt confidence. So yeah, I hope that I think it will matter. I think the thing that will matter the most is seeding, and that's the reason why I think it matters too. But yeah, I it's definitely a game worth watching. It's not like
Number on it.
yeah. It's not like the Bengals who are literally going to sit Joe Burrow and just like, you know what, it's not worth the injury bug. 3rd or 4th seed, it's fine. We're definitely playing at home, so they don't care. Though I guess we are
right, because they clinched the division already, of course, which is a distinction. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I do agree with that. In terms of this game's importance, I'm going to go ahead and say 7 out of 10. I will, and the reason I'm saying that is, first of all, for seeding, I think. Anything can really happen. I mean, you look at the Colts; they're going to play the Jaguars this week, and then if they beat the Jags, then they'll be 10-7. I think they could pip us, especially if we lose, since they beat us earlier in the season. The Chargers and Raiders, their clash is probably going to determine which the last team to make the AFC playoffs. Because then whoever would be 10-7, I don't think that we would go below them due to head-to-head, for example, against Chargers. But against the Colts, you could easily see us slipping to 6 or something, and then. Again, it is a little bit of a marginal question. Would you rather play like the Bengals or the Bills, or would you rather play the Chiefs or the Bills? I think the Chiefs are the one team that I definitely do not want to see us play in the wild card. I do want to see. I think if we play like a team like the Bills or the Bengals, I think it's a little arbitrary to debate that, because at the end of the day, the seeding reflects who was best throughout the season, right? That's what's supposed to do. So I would say that's the main thing. The main thing I don't want to do is play the Chiefs, and I think if we win against Miami, it is way less likely that'll happen. I mean, barring, anything can happen. Like Denver could beat the Chiefs on the last day for whatever reason, and then they could sink below the Bengals and then some weird permutations like that. But I think in general,
the Bills beat the Chiefs too, so they would lose on that account also. So they might actually, if they, I mean, I don't think
so. Maybe it's. So okay, so maybe in that case it doesn't really matter, because if we win or lose, it is relatively unlikely that we'll play the Chiefs, but I think that likelihood increases if we lose. And I don't want us to be in a mentality where we're like, oh, I don't want to play this team, because I think at the end of the day, if you have expectations for your team, you need to be able to play against good teams and win. But at the same time, why not make it a little easier for yourself and play a different team in the wild card, and then meet the Chiefs in the divisional, at least, you have a playoff win behind you. So I'd say I'd give it a 7 out of 10 for that reason.
You're giving this game a 7 out of 10, then what would you rate like a playoff game? Like,
I mean, playoff games are always 10 out of 10. You win or go home.
They are.
There's no case, in my opinion, I don't see a case where a playoff game can be anything but a 10 out of 10.
They could be an 11 out of 10 if it's like
if it's a like, Super Bowl, maybe.
Do or die for your franchise.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, Super Bowl too.
Yeah, or maybe maybe if it's like maybe if in a hypothetical case, if it was like Tua and a wild card, that might be like 11 out of 10, because he really needs that win. But again, Tua, I think it's important for us. Yeah. I do. Yeah, Tua. What were we saying, Ravi?
I know Anirban is actually a Tua believer, so
I am.
I think he's. I know Rohan touched a little bit about Tua's situation, but I think he is in quite a precarious situation. I think he deserves a lot of credit. A lot of credit for leading the Dolphins to their mid-season win streak. He was the one who kickstarted that. But lately he has been quite bad. In the last 3 games, he's had just 3 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, and he was just overall not looking that great. And his receivers weren't looking that great either. So I think for Miami, this game actually might be like an 8 out of 10 or something. Or for certain people in Miami, this game matters quite a lot, because it could be, this offseason, if he plays atrociously one more time, they could try and make a play for Russell Wilson or just anyone else, or do what the Bears did last season and try sign sign another quarterback and have a competition again. So we'll see, I guess.
I'm gonna throw in a little bit of shocking commentary because the Dolphins have nothing to play for. I'm gonna say at the end of the game, Tua's going to take his shirt off and run across the field. Oh, I'm sorry, that happened with another guy from another Florida team.
Florida man.
Man, yeah, that would be something. If that happens twice in a league, that might be some kind of record, I guess. Yeah, I think with Tua, like you said, I do like him. I think injuries have definitely played a big role in kind of keeping him from his peak. But I also do want to say that Tua hasn't exactly been in a situation with the Miami offense this season that has really allowed him to succeed. And I think the Titans game really encapsulated a lot of that. First of all, I don't think this season his O-line has given him very much protection. You constantly see him throwing under pressure. And another thing I can't help but notice, especially, and this was again in the Titans game, but I was reading some other kind of commentary on the Dolphins' general season, and it just feels like so many of Tua's throws look so difficult. What I mean is you just see like Devontae Parker or Mike Gesicki catching it and like in the middle of like a throng of bodies and just getting their hands again, and every time it looks like a great catch. Like maybe like and obviously I'm exaggerating, it's not every time, but I'm just saying it just looks so difficult, that he has to be perfect because
So he
for
doesn't get
some
a lot of
reason,
protection from his offensive line. So
well, he
it's not
doesn't get a lot
necessarily
of
always the QB's fault.
protection. But what I'm saying is I think there's also a lot of cases where you just don't see his receivers getting enough separation from their defense from their thing, or maybe running routes in which the coverage of linebackers is actually right in front of their face. And like I just kept seeing that in the Tennessee game. And I feel like in that case, like it's just a little difficult when you're kind of limited by the people you're throwing to. And that being said, of course, I think this season Jalen Waddle has to be the bright spot for Miami. He was a rookie. He was brought in with pretty high expectations. Played in Alabama with Mac Jones, and he's played superbly this season. He's been excellent this season. And I think that's a relationship between Tua and Jalen Waddle that's really strong. We see them connect actually for a lot of touchdowns this season. Another guy's Mike Gesicki, who's a tight end for them. But again, I feel like that is something that maybe people don't see when we see all these stats on interceptions and stuff. It's kind of like, what is the situation we're putting them in? I mean, we talked about Trevor Lawrence throwing 3 picks. Like, look at 2 of those. And again, they're not always like. Sometimes it is the quarterback's fault. Other times it's also maybe because they're getting pounded right in front of their face. They have 3 guys running at them. They're 3rd and 10 or something. And I just feel like Tua doesn't feel confident enough, or maybe he doesn't feel like the team believes in him. Like for example, there's a point in the game where they literally ran Duke Johnson on a 3rd and 10. Right? What team what team that would trust their quarterback would run the ball at a 3rd and 10? In a like 2-possession game, I can't think of one. So I think there's a lot of factors going on there. I think you could write a book about and we all know that the Miami was really batting their eyelashes at Deshaun Watson over like the last year, which I think just wouldn't have made any sense. But my point here is that I think Tua is not in a great situation in Miami. I think if I were him, I guess just kind of looking outside in, I would try to leave this year and look for another team. I don't think the Miami coaching staff really has built the team to succeed around him. And they've also not made it clear at all that they have any faith in him, in my opinion.
I don't think Tua is in a position though to turn down a QB1 job. If he had, I don't think he has the market value right now to be like, oh, I want to look for a different spot.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong.
But I totally agree. I totally agree with your point that that the Dolphins have kind of, I think the way that the Dolphins management has handled Tua.
I'm sure Pittsburgh might want to take him.
Pittsburgh or
And
Carolina.
Very likely leaving.
Carolina. I mean, I think you can always go.
Carolina is just literally taking other franchises garbage, just seeing if it will work.
So, but yeah, I think that's the thing, and that's actually one thing I wanted to talk about in the game that is going to be tomorrow. In terms of what's going to be important. I think the Dolphins, outside of Jalen Waddle and I guess Mike Gesicki, I don't really see a lot of. I'm not I would imagine J.C. Jackson would be on Jalen Waddle, and that would be probably the one-on-one because Jalen Waddle is Miami's best receiver, though Devontae Parker does make some good catches sometimes. But yeah, I think it's going to be a case where, the Dolphins, I think it's going to be a case of really pressuring Tua. and really continuing that. It doesn't really seem like the Dolphins receivers are really able to kind of get wide open consistently. So I think really taking advantage of that and making those drives take a lot of time and put more pressure. If we look back at what made us lose against them in week one thing was like we just couldn't put pressure on Tua. We didn't have many QB hits in that game. We couldn't really break the pocket or force him out. We gave him so much time to make throws. And I think this is a really different defensive secondary. And that's why I asked you how important it was for the performance against Jacksonville, because I think that's going to be really important to us. If we can force him to make quick throws without having a lot of wide open players, I think that's where you get turnovers. So what do you think? Rohan, you can go, I guess.
Oh, sorry, technical difficulty. Yeah, it was, yes. So I missed the last part of that question.
Yeah, so I was just saying, and this, I kind of brought in the Jacksonville game to talk about the importance, how important is this defensive thing? Because I guess my question to you would be, what do you think is a defense or the Patriots defense recipe for success against Tua this week?
It's the same thing that I say every week. I'm like, don't give him a lot of room to operate, put him under a lot of pressure, which is kind of what other teams have been doing to him, and that's pretty much proved to be a successful formula. I mean, I think, for the Pats defense, JC Jackson has it's lived and died by him. I would say, like, when he performs, the defense is able to pull it off. When he's not up to speed, the defense is usually not very successful. So I think I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I think he's going to be the X factor in this one, at least for the Pats defense. Obviously Miami's a much better team than Jacksonville, and Tua is definitely not Trevor Lawrence, but it's definitely beatable, right? Tua is definitely a beatable quarterback, and given the other pieces on that offense, right? It's not going to be the easiest task, but if the defense plays the same way that they did against the Jaguars, I think I'll give them a pretty good shot at being able to take down the Dolphins.
Sounds good. And Ravi, what do you kind of agree, or do you see a different kind of avenue that you'd like to add maybe?
Defensively, I think I'll build on some of the points that we made earlier about just harassing Tua's receivers. That Tennessee had a lot of success in that. Like, neither Jalen Waddle or Devontae Parker had much success in receiving. Parker in particular had 13 targets and just 4 receptions for around 50 yards, and that was like a really, really inefficient use of their downs in that game. So I think if we just absolutely harass the receivers, the run game is not that great, and kind of force them to beat us on the run, we can really put them in a very tough position early on in the game. And I think, that is kind of what I expect. Like, we have shown that as a pass defense, we are consistently one of the best pass defenses in the league. The only team to get to us since week 6 has been the Bills. And I think they're going to be really worried about that. I think if we shut down their pass defense, like I said, they won't be able to beat us on the run. And, at that point, I think that is enough for us to hopefully win the game. Offense aside, though, I think the thing to watch in this game is Mac Jones. Hopefully, this is a much better defense than the Jags. If he can put up a good game against the Dolphins again, I think we'll be. I'll have more faith in us being a much more complete offense and rolling ball into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, definitely we can expect to see Mac Jones throwing the ball a lot more than he did in week 1. I think I can say that pretty comfortably. But actually, one thing I was actually going to say was, I think this could actually be a game where, again, we actually rely more on a running game, because if you look at the Miami defense, they allowed like 180 plus rushing yards to Tennessee. And they're really vulnerable to kind of different kinds of blocking schemes. And I think one thing that's actually emerging, and I'd like to know what you guys have any takes on this if you do, but I really do think that we really lucked out with the 2 pair of like primary running backs we have in Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. I mean, I've just seen this like so much. Like, I feel like this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars was like almost like a highlight reel in and of itself for the value that both of these players bring. Damian Harris, I think he's just such a like patient and agile player. Like, a lot of people used to talk about like when Le'Veon Bell was still like really kind of young in his early years at Steelers. He was tearing up the league. He was a really patient runner, you know. If he didn't see a hole immediately, he wouldn't just like kind of bulldoze in and try to get 2 yards. He'd kind of wait, like kind of see what the like kind of watch lanes open up in real time and then just go through those, you know. And I saw Damian Harris do that time and time again, you know, his ability to cut back, to kind of dodge defenders and then just kind of go forward. It just really fun to watch. And then you have Ramondre Stevenson, who I think also is pretty fast, and he's also just really strong. 100+ yard game, like I mentioned, 2 touchdowns. And I think this is totally a type of scenario where we can really take the game to Miami's rushing defense, at least to start. And especially related to that, I do want to note that the Patriots are only behind the Chiefs in opening drive touchdowns in this league. You know, we're a team that tends to kind of get points on our first drive, and that's really important, I think, because once we do that, once we have a lead, I think we can agree that we generally see we play a different style than if we're playing catch up 2 or 3 possessions down. So, Rohan, as a tiebreaker, what do you see being most important for our game tomorrow, the passing offense or the rushing offense?
I would say the passing because I really think that I mean, even though it's not really a direct 1-to-1 comparison, I mean, I guess the kind of low hanging fruit, the thing that's easiest to look at is the QB comparison of Tua versus Mac, right? Because I would say that there's probably a lot on the line on this game for Tua, despite the fact that this game doesn't really matter much for the Dolphins from a playoff standpoint. But I mean, is that going to be the difference when you're losing? I would say that I would say that given the fact that Mac Jones has recently kind of recovered right after like a couple of not so great games. If he puts up a decent performance against Miami, I think that should do the job, right? I think nothing is going to be overall too hard. I mean, can the Patriots still lose? Of course, of course they can. But I think if all the pieces if they just do their usual job, if they just play as they usually do, the running, the passing, as well as the defense, I think that it should just be like a well-ordered win that just keeps the pass chugging along. Now, why do I say passing and not the running game? I think it's because the running game has already kind of improved enough to really alert any of the possible opponent defenses. Because I do think that the Miami defense is going to have their eye out for the Pats running game. So I mean, what's to say that they're not going to expect a run and then Mac Jones just throws one down the field and puts a little surprise in there. I think there are going to be a lot of surprises in tomorrow's game because essentially you have a team that has nothing to play for and another team that has nothing to play for, but I would say little to play for. Although we went over this and both of you disagree with me on that, but I would say that I would say that just expect the unexpected tomorrow.
All right, I feel like that's a pretty good place to move on, segue to our scoreline predictions. So before we begin, I did want to mention my brother Amartya couldn't be here today, so he actually shared in advance his score prediction. He wanted to make sure it was there for posterity, and he is predicting a 24-10 win for the Patriots tomorrow. So pretty comfortable. Doesn't really anticipate there being too many challenges, though. As Rohan mentioned, Week 18. 2 teams with perhaps arguable ambitions for this game. Who knows? So that's Amartya's prediction. And I guess I'll let Ravi. Why don't you go after me?
That's funny. I was also going to say something very similar to 24-10, but for the sake of diversity, I think I'll likely go with. I think I could see the Patriots scoring a little bit more, so I see 27-13 Pats.
So I'm gonna say it's gonna be a lot closer because I did say expect the unexpected. 21-10, and I'm gonna go with the shock result. I'm picking the Dolphins tomorrow. I'm picking the Dolphins because if there's a week where it would be appropriate for the Patriots to not give 100%, it would be tomorrow. Even though that's not a popular opinion here, and that's probably not the right thing to say. Rationally, I think that makes sense. And because the Dolphins, they really don't have anything to lose at this point. They're just going to put it all out there. I have a weird feeling that this is going to come down to something like the Patriots are up 20, like they're up and then the Dolphins probably get a touchdown in the last minute, and they have an opportunity to tie with an extra point or opportunity to take the lead with the 2-point conversion. I say the Dolphins are going to go for the 2, and they're going to win it on that. I think it's going to come down to something crazy like that.
Does Tua have a good game? Is that how they beat us?
I think so. I think Tua's going to have a decent game, a decent enough game that all the other pieces of the team are going to be gelling along and do just enough to put the Dolphins over the line in a massive, shocking upset.
All right, I think
I'm also proving that I'm not a homebody.
Hey, every team has to lose sometime, so I do respect that. But I must say, I do feel like I also feel like we're gonna be playing the Miami for a second time. I think our players remember that and kind of the feeling of that Week 1 17-16 defeat. I think that also might be some intrinsic motivation, or at least I hope it is. And I do see a strong performance from us tomorrow, even if it's in Miami. But I will put a little closer because, like Rohan said, we don't know how Miami will come out and play. It's also away, right, which has its own set of challenges. So I'm going to predict a more narrow. I'll predict like a 21-19 win. I think it'll come down to a late defensive stop against Miami. And I do think that we're going to see a lot of rushing tomorrow. We're currently like top 8 in rushing yards and touchdowns this season. I'm expecting Ramondre Stevenson and Damian to kind of share the workload, maybe pick up cumulatively two to three, like 2 touchdowns. And maybe Mac will be more of a game manager and maybe like a red zone kind of completion. So that's what I'm going to say will happen. But I think that brings us to a good stopping point for today. So I just want to thank Rohan and Ravi for coming on and contributing to this discussion. Definitely. As always.
Definitely. I'm going to be keeping my eye out for all the other games out there because I would argue that the other games probably matter a lot more than the Patriots game tomorrow.
Oh,
so I'm going to keep an eye for the out-of-town scores.
Oh, yeah. Well, while we're here, Ravi, maybe we can go around and do a Raiders-Chargers prediction. Because just for context for everyone before we wrap up, currently, the Chargers have the 7th seed in the AFC, the last seed available, but they're actually playing the Raiders tomorrow. They're both in the AFC West, 2nd and 3rd respectively, and they're both 9-7. So whoever wins that game basically will be making the playoffs in the 7th seed. So I want to ask you guys quickly, how do you think that's going to go? What are you calling for that? Ravi, why don't you go since you mentioned it?
So I think the Chargers will win. I think they're overall just like more consistently been the better team, and the losses that they have been very close, including one very close loss to the Pats. What I kind of want to root for the Raiders. They've had a pretty crazy season. I see them as a bit of an upset, and the Chargers will have plenty of time to be good. They had the second. They're already this good. They almost won their division, and they have the second most cap space heading into the next year. So I think I hope the Raiders make the playoffs for what I think is the second time in like 10 years, and break their duck.
It'll probably be their first time making the playoffs as a Vegas team. But I'm gonna go Vegas on this one. I'm gonna say the Raiders win it, but I'm gonna say it's gonna be by a squeaker. Beyond that, I don't really know much.
No, that's fair.
That matchup.
No, yeah, like the Raiders. They started the season really hot, kind of being off and on. I really think it's a coin toss. I'm gonna lean with the Raiders on this one. Every now and then, the Raiders this season just pulled out like a really crazy offensive performance, like against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. And I think the Chargers have had some tough losses against Denver, as well as other kind of like. I think the loss against Denver was actually a pretty good encapsulation how the Chargers sometimes kind of struggle with putting away teams. And maybe we might even see them have some more 4th down attempts that you could argue maybe cost them the game against Kansas City earlier too. So I'm gonna say they'll probably win by like I'll say the Raiders will win by like maybe 4 or 5 points, like 13-17. But it'll be a game I want to watch for sure because it's probably, like you guys said, most overtly has the most on the line. So, but yeah, all right, that brings us to a close. Thank you for everyone who's listening, and we hope you have a nice rest of your week. We'll be talking to you again next Friday to preview the wildcard matchup against whoever will be playing, and we'll see you then. So take care.
And thank you to all of our viewers, and be sure to check us out on Twitter, Insta, whatever platform you use, and have a great week and enjoy the final slate of games of the regular season tomorrow.